Dave with Nerdarchy here, for Nerds by Nerds, with my fellow Nerdarchist Ted.
How you doing?
So today, Ted, let's talk about bullets. Although it's spelled weird, it looks like bullet.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's got that, that extra E at the end and, whatnot. So
they must be from France.
Oh, must be. So bullets, what do you want to talk about?
Well, bullet, also, commonly referred to as the land shark.
Indeed.
So what we're doing here is Dungeons & Dragons Monsters, and we're going to talk about the bullet because, well, they're freaking cool.
They are indeed.
Going back to 1E, first edition, I would say that the bullet has always been one of my favorite monsters. It's one of the more original and interesting monsters going way back to the very beginning of Dungeons & Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just friggin' terrifying and fearsome. I mean, you can't sneak up on one.
Nope.
It's virtually impossible.
Between tremor sense, scent, the ability to burrow, it's hard to get the
and they're kind of basically like eating machines. That's all they do is eat and breed. Is basically what the description says. So I guess the question is, how do we use this monster in an interesting way?
Well, for one, there is always the let's step outside the box and break from tradition. I myself, I'm a big fan of the homebrew campaigns, and there's nothing to say that either, a particular encounter is something that's unique, or that a particular monster in your world is unique. You can say, okay, yes, this is supposed to be a magical beast, and it's supposed to have an intelligence of 2, but do you really have to do that? What if you have someone who...
And yes, folks, we have a little bullet right here keeping us company for this conversation to make sure we get it right.
Yeah, Dave wants one as a pet. What happens if you have one that has either been awakened or is some kind of legendary creature that's actually, sentient? So now you've got it that's actually got a role-playing tool beyond just a, mindless killing machine. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, there's always that, and always remember too. It's like like in our group, we have a bunch of players who've been playing a long time, and they got the monster manual memorized, and the second and third and fourth and fifth one as well. So it really is hard to surprise your players.
Exactly.
But the best way to surprise your players is run something that's not right out of the book. Maybe in your world, they're not mindless per se, or they don't live solitary or in pairs, but they live as a colony, and maybe they have a hive mind. So there's always fun and interesting things you can do with it. So they're huge or large?
I believe they're huge.
No,
doesn't say on there.
We can consult the base, and it doesn't tell us. I think we're supposed to figure it out by the size of it. But or you could do something interesting, and maybe the bullet isn't the main encounter. Maybe it's the mount to what you're about to fight. Isn't that terrifying?
That would be pretty incredible.
Or maybe you do something really crazy, like your adventuring party finds a baby bullet, right? And there's a ranger or druid amongst them, and instead of being the money-grabbing whores that most players are, they decide to try and return it to its parents.
Or keep it as a, or to try to, break the rules and, go to the DM. What do I have to do to get this as an animal companion?
Fuck that. You can't have it as an animal companion. No, maybe. But, you could do something more interesting with it and try and incorporate it into the story, as an animal companion. If you're a high-level ranger or druid, why not? Since it's a baby and it's got reduced, you give it reduced stats.
Right, obviously. Or you can't say the baby is as terrifying as the adult.
Or make the players decide that they're not going to keep it and they're going to take it back to track the parents down. And how does that go? How do you present this thing back to mommy and daddy without getting eaten?
Well, in the actual article that I actually read, I don't know whether it's considered core material for Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, but I read an article that pretty much the pairs mate, the female lays the eggs, they hatch inside a day, and the baby's trying to eat the mother.
Oh,
Because she's in a weakened state or whatnot. So I don't know whether that's supposed to be,
I missed that. I missed that article.
Well, when I was doing some research, I found it on, found it online, and it looked like it was, fairly legit. I don't remember the exact website. So I don't know whether it's considered canon or whatnot. But I mean, if that's the way things go, well, the mother could possibly get away or not, but maybe not. It's a whole other situation.
You went in a completely different direction with that than I thought it was going. I thought like the turtles, they make their way to the ocean.
No,
they get eaten by birds. Some of them.
No, they try to eat mommy.
No, they come out roar. It's like hatching a bunch of aliens,
basically.
So and again, in your world, it doesn't have to be that way. You can change it up. You can you're the DM. You can do whatever you want. That's one of the beauties of the game. The rules are there as a guideline.
Exactly.
But we don't have to follow them exactly, and it's better not to sometimes because again, if you're like us, you have players that memorize the monster manual. So how are you going to keep it fresh and new? Well, you change it. It's that easy.
One of the main reasons why I've always enjoyed inventing monsters, because then there's no one can tell you, oh, that's not the case, dude. It came out of here,
right.
Unless you're in here, you don't know.
and I guess in some ways too, that's like the Pathfinder and the 3.0 and beyond D&D versions is. Now, like, everyone could just go, oh, knowledge this, knowledge that. And before in the game, you just, the DM decided whether you knew or you didn't.
Right.
And now, there's a check for that.
It's like, is there a chance that you've come across this knowledge? There's a point where it's like, really, how much stuff can you actually know? You can keep making rolls, and if you keep rolling high enough, oh, yeah, I know it. Well, where did you come across that information?
Yeah, it's not like today, your players don't have the characters don't have the internet. Any book they come across, someone had to physically write it.
Right.
Unless you're playing more of a Renaissance type game, their information is not widely spread.
Right.
So for the only way to get it is from a book that someone has taken the time to write, or to have been mentored and taught. At a certain point, if you think about all the knowledges and the skill checks, especially when it comes to monsters, it is kind of asinine after a while.
So feel free as DMs out there to house rule that shit and just be able to say, no, you have no idea what this is. It makes for far more dynamic encounters because you don't have to worry about, having the players having that forehand knowledge.
Now, back to the Bulette. So we ran a campaign years ago called Ulfgania. You might recall.
Indeed. That's one of my favorites.
And, we, it was cool because we all segmented the world up and we each took a piece and did our own thing. And my place, my dominion was the dwarves and their kingdom called Stonehome. And the story went that, in an ancient war with the orcs, it kind of lost. The orcish priests for miles surrounded the mountain of Stonehome, the dwarven fortress, and basically cast this ritual curse that for miles and miles around the mountain, the earth just fell away, disintegrated, and created this vast chasm filled with, soil instead of rock, and also full of bullets. It was like a hunting and breeding ground for them. So figuring that the orcs they've defeated the dwarves and they trapped them in their home. So the dwarves, being the industrious lot that they are, they built massive bridges that spanned it for miles, and to traverse this chasm so they could get in and out of Stonehome, and then they fortified the bridges. But they still had, belays running around beneath the bridges and in this chasm. So a dwarven rite of passage became to the young dwarves, maybe with a couple of veterans to supervise, would go out and go on the belay hunt. And they would bring down a belay, and it was, basically the passage of the rite of manhood. And then they would harvest the plates behind the belay's head and use it to forge what they called shark steel, which is kind of like it's not quite mithril, it's not quite adamantium, but it had that electric silver kind of opalescent sheen to it. And of course, they would make nothing less than
Masterwork quality.
masterwork craftsmanship from it, and they'd also use it to enchant it. So from that monster sprung this idea that created a new material in that world. But from the new material in that world, and the dwarves, we kind of came up with a holiday or a festival, the Festival of Blades, where it was the one time a year the dwarves would leave their home, and they would and for 1 week they would come and trade with other races at a nearby town, and the town almost sprung up around that festival,
right,
that would happen every year. So the ideas you have for like just one monster can spring forth all these other ideas.
Right.
This chain of events to make something more interesting without actually even interacting with the monster.
Yeah. So you've got a monster that you made no changes to the monster itself, just kind of its role in the world. You've got a rich soil that some component of it draws the creatures to. Well, since there's so many of them that are there, the indigenous people, here the dwarves, have to deal with it. And it's a sequence of events that have built this very real, very large component of your section of this world, and it then has a rippling effect over the rest of the campaign setting because of what you've done. And I, as a character who's been to the Festival of Blades, it's lots of fun. It's very interesting, and that's only one component. You could eventually say, okay, well, what happens if you've got a dwarven ranger who lives outside, who has befriended a Bulette, or has got a druid that's using one as a mount, or some such, or vice versa.
Or what if the movement springs up, to protect the Bulettes? Here these dwarves keep murdering them and stealing their hide for to make to forge metal from it.
You could have somebody who's taken a smaller Bulette and crafted this obscene helmet or armor out of the whole thing that's got them shaped like a Bulette. That can you could have it enchanted so that they get Bulette-like properties. They get the ability to burrow and tremor sense and whatnot. There's so many different avenues that you can go without actually changing the monster. I know we looked up the Pathfinder D20 site, and there's variants on the different Bulette. You could have one that's like a porcupine, so it's got spines and stuff on it. So every time you attack it with claws or a natural attack,
I'm guessing it can't burrow backwards.
I guess not. You can always turn around.
Well, yeah, you'd have to turn around.
There's leprous one that gives disease, which I think kind of is very bizarre sequence because typically they're a very healthy and hardy monster, but who am I to judge? And you're always able to come up with whatever variants pop into your head. I know. I look at it as, okay, well, there's not too far a stretch between this and some of the dinosaurs, so what if you had it, with some of the dinosaur-like properties, horns or some such. You could do all kinds of crazy stuff. You could give it a charge attack that make it even more terrifying.
Or, like you said, you could do the legendary Bulette, or just a really old one that is like Godzilla proportions, Imagine that coming through. It'd be like the Tarrasque Awakening. It could be the Tarrasque in your world. It could be, there could be an area where there is one that's very old and powerful that, barbarian tribes worship and is taken as their totem, and they protect it.
Yeah.
Even though it eats them whenever it can, they protect it, and they may even see it as almost like a blessing to the tribe when one of them gets eaten.
Oh, no. Oh, Thog has been eaten. Blessed day. Lucky Thog.
We went and looked up this... we looked it up in the Monster Manual, and we looked it up on the D20 site, because it's been a while since either of you used the Bulette in our campaign.
That's true.
So well, let's take a look at some stuff so we're not misquoting rules here. And I'm like, because I was thinking, right, you could even use them for a low-level party, not as a combat encounter, but like an obstacle to get around or overcome. And then, so we're looking at the senses, and I'm like, tremor sense, set. I'm like, damn, you can't even sneak up on these bitches. You get within 60 feet of them, and there's a pretty good chance they notice you.
Yep.
And because of the nature of the Bulette, if they notice you, they come to see if you what you taste like. They're kind of like sharks. They just take a bite anyway to find out if you're edible. So,
oh, that would be an excellent pairing since they're both always hungry. A troll and a Bulette.
yes, but they would probably try and eat each other.
Not if the troll's got a little bit of sense and maybe some ranger levels to train it.
Well, there you go. There's the troll riding the Bulette. Or
just eating their way through whatever they can.
Or what about a giant taking one as a pet?
Mm.
Because sure, it's kind of a threat, but a giant's a giant. He'll just thump it a couple times.
Stop that!
yeah, until it learns. And imagine a giant that trains it as a hound.
Mm.
What if he trains it to track, which it already does anyway? But guided by the intelligence of a giant, that would be terrifying.
Indeed.
Or maybe he collects them.
What if he's got a pack?
Yeah, so normally they don't do that, but this giant's figured out how to make that happen. That would suck. They're normally a CR7. Well, now they're challenged. Now you can challenge a much higher level party, and the thing is, the Bulette, it's not hard for them to get the surprise.
Right.
Being as they can burrow with their tremor sense, and they're freaking fast. A movement of 40 is nothing to sneeze at.
No.
And a barrel of 20.
Yeah.
And then they have that crazy jump attack thing that they do.
They can leap.
Which is awesome, because it's almost like a shark leaping out of the water, except for they leap out of the ground.
Come at you with 4 claws.
I mean, sharks are crazy enough. At least you can get on land and be like, nah. These guys, what do you do? Go in the water with the sharks? You just kind of boned at this point. Thank God they can't fly. Unless you use the winged template, and then you're really screwed, or the half-dragon template. Because we've mentioned it before, you can always awaken a monster, you can always add templates.
Indeed.
Which are they're acceptable, but some of the more boring ways to change them up, and your players will figure that one out too.
Right.
Because remember, they've memorized the mouse manual, bastards.
Which means they know the templates too.
They know the templates too. But yeah, when you come up and use them in new and interesting ways, like the pack that's being guided by a giant, or the troll's mount, or the semi-intelligent colony, and when you think about it, right, you go with the hive mind and a colony. Well, what's a colony usually driven by?
A queen.
A queen. What the hell does that queen look like? You know what I mean? What collective mind is driving a colony of bullies? That could be a terrifying adventure too. So it's a nice mid to high level monster.
Mm-hmm.
Low levels, there isn't much your party can do but try and get away from it.
You can get away from it unless you want to reduce the stats and make a smaller one. You could send an adventuring party out, based on the breeding story. You could say, okay, well, rumor has it that when a Bulette hatches, the hatchlings eat the mother. Well, they're not going to eat the metal, or the metal-like hide. So you could possibly just send them out there on a hunt. Rumor has it, try and bring the harvested material back, and then it's like, okay, well, you could be trying to get around baby ones, maybe daddy's sniffing things out to see what's going on, to look after the little ones, and all you're trying to do is a cat and mouse game, stay away from the Bulette.
Right. Well, and actually that's kind of interesting, because if you take because maybe if maybe it is just the case that the Bullets come, bang, and leave, and Papa goes and back to whatever he's doing until it's mating season again to find another one. Mom's been eaten, so you got all these little Bullets running around that maybe are only like CR3s. I didn't even think about that. That could be interesting. For a lower level party where maybe they can take on 1 or 2 of them at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But not a dozen.
Not a dozen.
And these monsters are highly territorial. They're not above eating their own kind.
Absolutely.
So some of them could even be already weakened from fighting with each other. So, you can have an interesting low-level encounter. Thanks, Ted. I never even thought of that. So, but other than that, again, the Bulette is an animal. As far as it's a magical beast, but its intellect is that of an animal.
Right.
It functions like an animal. It's an apex predator. That's the role it's gonna fill in your campaign. There are some things you can do to make it interesting and not as routine.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's got to, all your monsters have specific niches they kind of fill.
Right. You're not going to wander upon a Bulette who is a pacifist,
No, not likely.
unless you decide that your campaign needs to have an awakened pacifist Bulette, and it's going to fill some huge role. There's really no need to go down that path. But whatever.
Well, you could do something interesting. Like, what if, say, your party is, not quite up to snuff to fight a Bulette, and they know they're not nowhere near it. It's just intimidating. It's oppressive, and it takes an interest in them, but doesn't actually attack them. It decides to adopt them for some reason, and it could be like a comedy thing. For a few scenes where it runs around and tramples their stuff, whatever. And it could become a role-playing thing like that. It could become a challenge, like, how do we get rid of this thing? And what if it decides we're food all of a sudden? I think
kind of like acting like the dog that doesn't know any better.
Exactly.
So it's just running through, stomping on the fire without a care, crashing through whatever tents and stuff you've erected.
What if this particular Bulette lives in a region where its prey is so plentiful? And it's the same thing that it's always eating, so it won't eat anything else.
Right.
Whatever that thing happens to be. So when it sees,
something
people,
else.
Humanoids, it's not actually it doesn't associate them with food. So you could do something along those lines to make it a little bit different, and
that's a good idea.
And challenge your players in another way. It's a little iffy because if your players are like mine, they're probably gonna fucking try to attack it anyway. Like, clearly, it can eat their head in one bite, but, in their first level, what are you going to do?
It won't leave us alone. Well, just attack it. That'll make it go away, right?
My players are a little thicker than others. And especially if you give them a long night of not killing anything.
Do you realize how many years ago that was?
Well, I don't know. I've been there too. Sometimes
that was pre-3rd edition.
Yeah. Sometimes we just need to kill. Anyway, we're getting off topic and away from the Bulette. I think we've covered everything. You got anything you want to add?
No, I think it's a marvelous creature. There's many different ways that you can use it above and beyond its CR7. We gave you ideas for how to use it low level, how to use it high level. Beyond just give it some levels, some templates, and go crazy with it.
I think the only way you could make a Bulette more angry than calling it marvelous if you would have said it was fabulous. It would definitely bite your head off for that.
Yeah, well, probably. They say humans, taste good with ketchup, so. And then, of course, you always have the ability to, harvest it, and, please, feel free to use the concept of shark steel in your world. We've done it for many years. I think it's, pretty cool. And it's always great to have something that makes your world special.
Yeah, just remember, dwarves can ally anything with anything.
So, you got anything else?
No, that's it. I mean, Bullets are freaking awesome. I've always loved this monster since I was a wee lad and first started gaming. And, with that, we're going to wrap this up. Remember, you can find us on the Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter.
We got our own website, nerdarchy.com, which, you may have already seen or may not. We've already got an article written about Bullets, which has got some other information as well as some stuff we've talked about here.
With that,
so click like, subscribe. If there's a monster out there that you want us to talk about,
in the
put in the comments below. And until next time, stay nerdy.
My friend.